Hello everyone and welcome back to the third session in today's Green Party Women Online Conference. We are going to be discussing climate change campaign with GPEx member Britta Goodman. Before that, I will remind people that the discussion, who might have just recently joined the group, that the discussion in the chat box will be included as part of the minutes. The video conference itself is being recorded, and some elements, particularly some audio and video content of the speakers, may be incorporated into some kind of promotion material or possibly an archive that we use as an educational resource. So just people are notified regarding that. I will then post again the updated minutes of the agenda into the chat box on the side, because the difficulty we have, and it's a function of the Zoom itself, is that when people leave the chat session and come back in, they no longer have access to the chat that was discussed previously before the point that they came into the meeting, which means that we're having to repost the update every 20 minutes. That contains differences, the different links to the Dr. Kate's presentation on women in prisons, which just has more up-to-date links on the campaign and also the Insight campaign. So it's now gone into the chat for everyone to have a reference there. So we are now moving into session 3, climate change campaign. So I'd like to ask Britta Goodman, who's our GPEx representative on campaigns, to briefly overview what has been happening in the Green Party with the climate campaign and her position within that, and why we need to sort of take some action on this now. Britta?
Oh, I can unmute myself. That's great. Hi everybody. I'm sorry for being a bit late. I needed to prepare the presentation, which took a bit longer than I expected. So sorry for that. Yeah, so we have at the moment on GPEx, there's the ACE campaign. I don't know who of you have heard of it. It's the Action on Climate Emergency campaign, which is basically the idea is to support councils and councillors in their climate emergency declarations. So far it's all good. So the campaign is basically developed and agreed on, more or less. And we have decided to employ a member of staff, so that who would be organizing and coordinating the campaign. Unfortunately, with the Corona crisis and careful financing, we haven't employed the person yet. So they will be employed, but not as of now. And so we've been thinking about a membership-led campaign that could be suitable for the Green Party women. And should I talk about it now?
Yes, if you could do. Yes.
Yeah, if you let me share my screen, then let me see. I need to.
So essentially this is not taking the place of an existing campaign, but this is as an interim process, because due to the COVID crisis, the person who would have been appointed by now in position has not moved forward on the appointment due to the COVID crisis. So we're trying to essentially sort of pull up the slack in getting some awareness out regarding this campaign. Is that sort of a fair summary?
Yeah, sounds good. Are there any questions already? I'm sorry, I'm kind of a bit. We rehearsed this earlier, and then it was all fantastic with the slideshow.
I think if you can explain briefly why a climate campaign, certainly something that is talking about a green recovery campaign, is important now in regard to COVID.
This is all part of the presentation.
Oh, okay.
Can you see it now?
I can't see anything on my screen. There is an option to share screen. Yes.
So, and then.
Ah, I can see something better than normal. Yes.
Is it the proper slideshow?
It looks, yes, I can see something, and I've got the images. Yes, we've got that. Yes.
Okay, then I will just start the. Is it now full screen?
Ah, yeah. Yes, full screen.
Okay, so it's the working title at the moment is Better Than Normal. I need to move those images out of the WhatsApp. And So what we've all seen is that the COVID crisis has rapidly transformed the society and the economy. And leaving now all the NHS and all of that aside, as governments, so what is going to happen next? Governments, and that is globally, will have now to focus on the economic recovery and design rescue packages. And probably many of you have had this, this revelation that there's basically, as soon as they're going to decide on those rescue packages, this is what is going to happen for at least a decade. And this is going to lock us into a fixed set of finances. And so the most likely option for the UK is that the government will choose to go into business as usual. And that will mean two things. That will mean a fossil fuel-based economy and also more austerity. This has been in the news. Here, George Osborne basically already announcing that austerity is going to be one of the remedies in his mind. And the consequences is what I said. It's going to be a decade of fossil fuel-based economy. And that is what is really dramatic, I think. All the alternative funds that have been created to go into renewables, I mean, even if too slow, they will no longer be available. So there is this social injustice aspect, and we just don't have this decade of waiting time that things will be better if we don't act now. The planet will not be, I mean, the climate will just not be, we will not be able to rescue it anymore. And there's the better and also, I guess, the only option. And luckily, we are not alone. So in this, there's the EU, there's the UN, there's the Committee on Climate Change that is advising the government in climate change matters. And they're all looking for alternatives in how to get a green recovery of the ground. And interestingly, there's also Alok Sharma, the Conservative Climate Secretary, who is also positioning himself towards climate solutions. There is Green Recovery, Green New Deal, basically. What would that give us? A 10-year plan to rebuild as a zero carbon economy, a just transition from fossil fuels to clean technologies, and tackling inequalities. There are also those parallels between COVID and the climate at the moment. That is, that we've, I think, all seen globally as a surprise how quickly or swiftly governments can act if they must. And also what the high cost is of the delay. So if we fail to act in time, and that will be even higher for climate change. And many people are also noticing the benefits from a healthier environment, and also that society has been strengthened. So there's, I mean, I don't need to explain that. I want to keep it short as well. And although people are experiencing a lot of pressure, many would like to keep those benefits. And I think just from the conversations I'm having, many people have strong feelings now for the environment and also for family. Really, it's really something that you, no matter where they're coming from, basically, if it's a conservative neighbor or your kind of young people you all of a sudden talk with, many of them, or most of them, all I've talked to, are experiencing the same thing. Just briefly, what would a campaign look like? Because this is not to deliver a ready-made let's go now campaign, but it is to start the dialogue about how we want to, or if we want to campaign and how we want to campaign, and which things we need to keep in mind if we are campaigning. So a campaign is about winning. It's not just raising a banner, that is protest. Effective campaigns are emotional, and they are drawing people in. It's been a mistake also in climate change campaign for the longest time that campaigners have thought when people get the right amount information and the right information, they will just want to change their lives. That is basically not the case. So it's showing alternatives rather than fighting, being motivational rather than kind of teaching people, and mobilizing rather than just knowing it all. And so it is essential to plan the communication in a way that people feel really drawn into it. This is why experts keep it short and simple. They are visual, they create events, they are proactive. So they try to see what the future will bring and answer to that. And they talk with the people in the language they are speaking and in the basically concerns that they're having. That is incredibly important. So what we've been thinking about so far as a strategy, since we want to win, is since it is all about the economy, we need to send messages to where the decisions are actually being made. That would be the Treasury, that would be Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, financial institutions, industry, and because that is, you cannot jump from Hounslow, where I live, by the way, Hounslow Green Party, hi, just to the Treasury and expect them to change everything immediately. We need to identify through a process that is called backwards campaigning, the little targets on the way that lead to there. There's lots and lots of lessons to learn, for example, from plastic pollution and microplastic campaigns that have really exemplary shown many of the elements that good campaigning consists of. For example, you need to hear a message 5 times and always from a slightly different angle. We could see the movement growing. From first, I think it was for me at least, it was this film about an island of plastic in the ocean, which seemed surreal. And the more parties are really and organizations are sharing the same messaging, the more real it becomes. And the more also people start thinking about solutions and are then demanding that those solutions will be implemented. Luckily, we don't need, I don't think at least, we will not need to come up with these minimum of 5 messages from 5 different angles ourselves all of the time, because there's lots of other campaigning organizations or also scientific institutions who are going to ask for the same thing as we are. But it will be a good thing if we are also in touch with our networks, that we can start to have also high quality content. The campaign content so far, as we've been thinking about it, would be a lot of social media. Videos are a really good way forward because they can be very emotional and personal, and also something that your friends will want to see. We can direct it into petitions that can be national and local. We can create events to attract the media, and we can also create events to spread the word locally. So it's 2 different things, or it can be the same, depending on how it's being designed. Then I'm already coming to the end. Campaigning has to be strategic, and it is creative and exciting, and we need to do it as a team. So among you or among the other Green Party members that you know, I've tried to come up with a bit of a minimum list what we need. So we first need everyone who loves campaigning and who's also willing to be on the front line, for example, to take a video of themselves. Then we need to make sure that we have representatives from minority groups, so that we cover all the angles. Then we need the wordsmithers and the social media adepts. We need keen readers who make sure that we don't miss the change in the news or something important that we need to take on board. We need people who like to get back to people and tell them that they did a great job. And we need graphic designers. And if all is really going very well, then a fundraiser or 2 would also be of no damage. So here are the links of the articles that I've posted for those who are interested. So everybody can have the presentation if they like, or just only the link page. Thank you. And if you have any questions.
Thank you very much, Britta. So, Fantastic presentation, and well done on the tech in difficult circumstances. Mightily impressed. So just as a quick recap, this is a campaign responding to some of the questions. This has not gone public. This is a discussion forum for a project that myself and Britta are very keen to get off the ground because of the difficulties in, first of all, sustaining a campaign manager through the official HQ channel because of the COVID crisis, and also because it's something that I think, because of the change in circumstances and how we are actually living our lives due to the COVID crisis, people are starting to reevaluate and ask these questions about what is important, what kind of things do we want as part of our society. And the value shift that I'm seeing has been quite stark in the last few weeks, in that the focus of attention for, certainly in families, about what was important in their life, that they are really starting to appreciate the clean air, the sort of the lack of pollution aspect, and realizing that perhaps now this is a time where we need to start shifting our priorities in what we're doing. And this is an opportunity to tap into that feeling that we want. Everyone's talking about sort of getting back to normal, but what actually is normal? It's clarifying it in a way that is actually sustainable, and that we can do something to put pressure so that when the rescue packages are being put together by governments, that we are making them as green as possible, so that we don't automatically go back into this reflex knee-jerk reaction of fossil fuel reliant economies. It's trying to sort of grab the message now and raise awareness on it so we can start shifting that conversation. So based around the comments that Britta has made, can we open this up to questions on the climate campaign? I think Tina had a comment, but I'm not sure if I've answered it within the actual discussion there. Any hands up for comments or questions? So right now we don't have the Slack group set up, but the purpose of the discussion today, I've got a question from Emma, is to gauge interest on people who would like to work on aspects of this campaign. So we have, obviously in the chat, if people can highlight any skills that they have, any links to networks that they think would be relevant, then we can start allocating focus groups on a particular issue that we can then transfer to the Slack group for further discussion. So Emma, your comment, please.
I just wanted to say, I get what you're saying about not kind of concentrating on like the facts so much, the factual thing that doesn't change people's minds. But I'm kind of a little bit wary about that, because I understand what you're saying, but for myself personally as a campaigner, I really like to have all the facts there, because I like to do a lot of anti-nuclear campaigning around my way. And what I find is that if you kind of appeal to people's emotions on nuclear power, like about the waste and, well, mainly the waste and the accidents, you get called unrealistic, and people don't take you so seriously. So I kind of really like to back things up with the science. So whilst I agree that campaign to appeal to people on an emotional level is a good idea, we have to be careful not to drift into the sort of like the reputation that people already have about us as being unrealistic and idealistic. So and that's why quite often I'll try and use things like the Financial Times when I'm talking about the cost of nuclear power, and other even more right-wing or sort of established papers like that, to say, look, even the right-wing Tory government says, or not the government, but the right-wing Tory people say this is uneconomical. So I get where you're coming from, but I think I like to keep that side of it really secure as well, and you quite often use government sources to use against their own arguments. That's all.
Rita, to respond to that?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I wouldn't. I don't disagree with that at all. It's just, I think the early climate change approach was to throw all the information that was available in a very kind of dense and that's a bit too much. So I guess when you're making a video, for example, it's good to focus on one piece of information so that you can take it in and try to relate it to what does it mean to the people really. So if there's, for example, radioactivity, it will be your children, yeah, who will have deformation, for example. And then if you can find someone who can talk about what it means, and can basically corroborate that, then that's a good, that's one information that is probably for one video enough. It doesn't have then to be the cost of it, for example, or that it's that there has been accidents, or there has been all of the additional information that you could also deliver. But it's basically focusing on one thing, saying one thing at a time, and then saying the next thing in a different place, to not kind of dilute it also too much, or make it maybe too depressing or too long, or all of that.
I think some of the ideas we were discussing with myself and Britta was that the video campaign would be very emotional, but that it would be backed up by fact sheets and briefings, which would have those kind of links and those kind of statements, and essentially the fact-based refuting of the claims that are being made by the government. So that's kind of roughly where we are, is having an emotionally engaging campaign, but having all that information public so that it can be easily disseminated. I'm going to take questions from Loppy, then Louisa, and then Sal. Loppy, Linda?
I've got two questions. One is, on the slides, I didn't understand what backwards campaigning was. And the other one is that I found through working with XR that really online stuff is only getting to the people that are following you online and are already probably interested. What we really need is to have things that are interesting for people, things that are fun, and leaflets for people to read.
Yeah.
And we don't have them at present, not very many.
Yeah, so campaigning backwards means to identify sub-targets, basically. So if you want to, so for example, when you take the plastic campaigning, yeah, they didn't start, basically they also, I'm sure they started to approach the producers and the government and to say we need to change in legislation, we need to change, but they first went through basically the public, kind of explaining what is the problem. Then there was maybe microplastics in I haven't analyzed it properly yet for plastics, but I will look into that closer. So then it's microplastic in water coming from your sink, basically. Plastics we really don't need. Plastic also that is, I mean, all kinds of aspects that have not basically, it's not only trying to talk with the minister, but it's trying to identify people that will then basically make an impact on the minister. So trying to find a chain of events that will, it's like a bit of an avalanche, yeah? So not try to shoot them with one bullet, but try to create that avalanche that comes from different directions, different positions, and then some of them will be the ones where they then just cannot ignore it anymore. So that's the idea of backwards campaigning. And I agree with the leaflets, I agree with the social media. The thing is just at the moment, and this is why there's really everyone welcome to the working group, is social media is also what we can pull off now. It's really cost effective, and it's a way to already also measure a little bit our success, see where we're going, what is successful, what is not successful, and then trying to build it up from there. But I totally, the lack of leaflets is something that I'm finding also very hard to take.
I can confirm this is a bone of contention with Britta and has been for some time. Take questions from Louisa and then Sal. Thank you. Louisa, you're still muted?
I thought, yeah, I think we unmuted each other at the same time, okay. I'm concerned with, although, yes, there do seem some people saying how much they appreciate the quiet, I wondered to what extent people realise that their responsibility. In my mind, it's 10 years ago, when IF Yellow Yoko erupted, our traffic was grounded for about a week, I think it was. And I remember at the time people commenting on how much quiet it was at night, how much cleaner the air felt, but did it lead to any long-term change in travel? I'm afraid it didn't. It didn't even lead to any move to, say, reopen ferry routes or keep up the night trains. Quite the opposite happened. And in my experience, then to go by, I've seen people commenting on WhatsApp groups saying, hey, they really appreciate more having their own car and be able to drive around and the roads being so empty. So it's all very well saying, yeah, it's quieter, but are people had to restrict their own travel habits? And how are we going to get people back onto buses and trains when while maintaining social distancing? I mean, rural bus routes have already been severely affected by the cuts. What are they going to be like after the crisis?
Yeah, that's very true. I agree. I mean, ideally, I mean, for I think air travel, the only since the whole social or national distancing even is going to last for a while. I guess, I mean, all the prediction for international tourism are not very encouraging at the moment, aren't they? So I totally agree with you. Yeah, and there's also data from Australia that shows after the bushfires, governments are just going back to normal. Yeah, and they don't want to take responsibility, and also they don't have any plans. So ideally, I think if we would think about what we can do now, it would be, for example, what they're doing in Brighton, aren't they? Asking already for making the roads now fit for bicycles, so that you can start to change the habits. Starting to, I'm also not sure exactly what would be best, to have a conversation with people now to just get it, to make it an active thing in their minds, that these are the things we want to keep also in the future, so that if we, for example, could ideally now bring our councils to declare some roads as cycling roads, so that we can start cycling or get a bigger number of people cycling. I don't really have the answer to that, because it is, I mean, apart from that, the way that it looks, it will be a relatively slow transition. It's not that one day there is self-isolation and the next day everybody is released and we can go wherever we want to in numbers we wanted to before and drive all our cars everywhere. But that's why it's such a good opportunity to start campaigning now and also be in tune with the other campaigning organizations who are at the moment also, because it's not you cannot look, I mean, you need to be careful that you don't look like you're disrespecting the people who are now sick and dying, but that you start to not miss this transition period where things are probably possible, and at least to get people to change their mind and see this as an opportunity and something that we want to keep. I mean, this is where really one of the campaigning now, if we sit down as a group and we say this is something we want to achieve, transportation, for example, and how to make it, how to take what we've got now into the future. How is the campaign answer to that? That's something that we need to find out then.
Yes, I'll take Sal, then Caroline, then Tina. Sal?
Hi there. I just wanted to comment on the social media side of things. Some platforms are they're quite openly racist. So, for example, TikTok. Do you know TikTok?
I'm over 40, but I've heard of it. Yeah.
It's really fun, but yeah, you can very easily get a message out to absolutely loads of people on that. But part of the problem with it is that you're far more likely to get your video actually allowed if you're a young, white, pretty woman with no visible disabilities. So I would say we really, really need far more representation of Black, Asian, minority, ethnic people and visibly disabled people. So if we're going to use platforms that we know discriminate against them, then we can have campaigns where we all like reblog or retweet that kind of thing. So we put a real effort into that so that we can bypass the algorithms that are discriminatory. And then we also need to actually ask people, because I am not Black, Asian or minority ethnic. So I only know this because I've asked people who are, and gone and found out from Black Twitter is really useful, because people feel they can say things without the risk of white people getting really defensive and like attacking them for saying, hi, this isn't okay. So I think if we could find out which platforms were the best for getting those people represented, that would be wonderful. And of course, not just using them, like putting them at the front of the picture and then they don't get any actual power.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So you are happy to work with us on that, Sal, then?
Yeah, Sal's just volunteered herself as campaign manager on social media. Thank you, Sal.
Maybe not on Black, Asian and minority ethnic
No.
issues. I kind of feel like that might be the wrong optics.
I was slightly teasing. Thank you for your comments. We'll move to Caroline, Russell, then Tina, and then Bridget, briefly, if you couldn't, sorry if you were running slightly out of time. Caroline, then Tina, thank you.
Yes, very speedily. Britta, brilliant presentation. Thank you very much. On the Assembly, I'm doing quite a lot of work on the whole issue of transport and air pollution in relation to the COVID crisis. There's a lot of thinking going on, which I'm filling in on, not now, but about how to message that the kind of changes that we need to bring about. I've already written to Grant Shapps about changing default national speed limits to 50 from 70 and to 20 from 30 in built up areas, because that's the easiest way to get mass change to bring down the pressure on the NHS from collisions. But also the argument about physical distancing on our pavements is a really strong argument for taking road space and giving it to people who are walking and cycling. We're not going to, whatever kind of easing of the lockdown happens, we're not going to be going back to work as normal. Everyone's going to be physically distancing for probably a good couple of years or maybe even longer. So we need to be this kind of whatever this better than normal has got to make sure that we retain the quietness of our streets so that more people can get around under their own steam. But I don't have time to get involved in organising a campaign, but I'm very happy to contribute
yes,
the kind of backgrounds.
Really good.
And also on social media, there's lots of work that Sian and I on the Assembly and other elected Greens are doing that Green Party women could be amplifying. And one of the problems with there having been no Slack group is that there's nowhere for us to tell Green Party women what we're up to. And it would be really good to have that kind of dialogue going between elected Greens and Green Party women, so that there's a kind of, people can see what we're up to.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So we will follow that up regarding the Slack group, and happy to take on your suggestions regarding that. Can we move to Tina, former co-chair of Green Party Women?
Hi. Hard to do this in order, isn't it? Because I'm hearing things I want to reply to. I put my hand up. But so the notes I made were, when we talk about returning to normal, the only thing I can relate that to is I was at the Extinction Rebellion in London when we closed down all the roads. And although there was initially some upset from the locals, when they realized they were walking around and breathing air and cycling and enjoying the space, and about 4 days later when the inroads got opened up again, it was appalling, stark and really obvious, and people were upset. You could see the contrast. And I think that what we have to think about during this crisis in particular is that planning ahead as to how we do campaigns of any sort and the responses to those is such a rapidly evolving thing right now. We're all adapting ever so quickly. I don't like a Zoom meeting as a rule, but I am learning to love these things. And I'm realizing that I can sit in a meeting with 58 people where I could only get 20 in the room before. These are good things, and we are being dragged kicking and screaming, but rapidly. It's a bit like when they first invented computers, it happens fast. And this is going to be a gradual return to work. And that's another good thing, is that as people do it in slow segmentation, it would be done by the most important and valued work in society, in theory. In theory, it would be those with the most important roles if we could keep a handle on this. Sadly, it does look like it still involves HS2 and things like that, which is just crazy. But I think that's what we need to be guarding on, is what are they letting go back to work? Like, say, for instance, activists in climate like me right now are deeply frustrated that we fear licenses for all sorts of damaging things might go ahead, but there is no ability as a protester now to get out there and stand in front of that truck and stop it because we're in isolation. So I think we've got to be careful what's being taken, what advantages are being taken by corporate and by those sorts of people. But Britta, your presentation was just brilliant. Thoroughly loved. Better than before, better than normal, or better than before is quite
That's
true.
Dawn who has come up with that.
It is really good. But then maybe that my first thoughts on that as a campaign would be little examples of like, this is better than normal. This is better than normal. So you've got that constant looking back at what we did have. And that, you know, there's a thing, isn't there, that, I'm sorry, I'll finish this last point. I'm monopolizing. And there's a thing, isn't there, when you're giving up smoking, which I fail at, but if you do anything for 21 days, you stop doing it. You lose the habit, you just keep your addiction or whatever else it is that's keeping you going. But, you know, as this progresses, and I use my sister's husband as my guide stone in this, because he is standard Northern male, if there is such a thing, and he's, for the first time in his life, not working and staying at home in a household with 4 generations and 11 people. And I am watching the impact on all of those. But you know what? I think it's optimistic and hopeful. I think people are learning to love the time. A 4-day working week, never a better time for it. Universal basic income, obviously a great idea. Fresher, cleaner air, healthier population. Obviously, we're all breathing better, loving the sound of birds. So I think there's so many gains to be made during this. And I'm so glad to see Green Party women taking the opportunity to include more of us in this and take an initiative. So thank you. That's me.
Just to respond briefly to Tina's comment, I haven't been able to do it for this actual meeting because we had some stresses regarding the membership, as you may have been aware of. In terms of the video campaign, what I've done is I've managed to aggregate footage from the European Space Agency, which shows the CO2 emissions over Italy before the lockdown and after the lockdown. So literally there is 2 sides of the screen where one side is normal and the other side is better than normal. And also including shots of Japan, where it was the Mount Fuji, where you have the image beforehand where you can't see it and then the image parallel. So that's kind of the idea behind the campaign. Like I said, it's very much, it's in a development process and we're trying to get more people involved, but it's that before and after sort of essentially imagery that we're sort of trying to incorporate in the campaign. I'll take Tina and then I want a quick comment from Victoria. Sorry, not Tina, Bridget.
Oh, hi. I don't know if you can hear me. Can you hear me?
We can.
Hi. So I guess I've got quite a few different points. I think it's fantastic that we're thinking about the best dialogue and appropriate dialogue to use in reference to the before and after, because I've certainly been on the Green calls hearing the messaging around, you know, sensitivity of language, which I think is really important. I'm a councillor, and so for those of you who have said that councils are shut, that's appalling, and you can keep writing to your councillors and challenging them and asking them, is good decision making happening? Is good democracy happening? My council is having a meeting next week. We'll be voting, we'll be going public. So not everybody is shutting up shop, and certainly lots of people are working behind the scenes. Lots of officers are still there doing their important jobs. So there's a lot of work going on, and actually there is a lot of planning about what happens next, the post-COVID era, which is actually why I think it's really important that the work that we do as the Green Women is rapid and quick and dirty. Let's not be afraid of getting something out there. On social media, you can be quite lively and try something, and if it doesn't stick, then you just try the next thing, rather than saying in 3 weeks or 6 weeks we'll have something perfect. Really resistant to that, because on Wednesday we're discussing the renewal of what happens next. I'm really aware that I got a good briefing on the fact that the inequality of how COVID economically is affecting women, the loss in jobs on the high street, the retail jobs, other jobs, it'll be women who suffer the most. And whether we can, I think we need to do that before and after image of what does the Green New Deal jobs look like? What do better jobs look like? What does better quality of life look like for women? And how can our renewal and our planning be to ensure that our women and all of our society go forward to a better place. So that's what I want to say. On cycling and reclaiming the road, I saw yesterday We Are Cycling campaign is already a fantastic campaign that's running that has lots of information for local councils and asks residents to write to local councillors. So nick that, run with it. And bus journeys, I've asked the councillor to do a bit of work. Right now, I know we haven't got much time, but right now you're discriminated against to get season tickets and discount tickets if you are a part-time worker over a full-time worker. You get a better price if you work 5 days a week. Women, parents, mothers, carers are part-time workers. They don't get a better price for that bus ticket. So I've got somebody working on doing some research, but if anybody else has done work or will be doing work, can we tally up together? Because of course we want people on public transport, but if we're working from home, the numbers don't work, and you have to have the economic argument to get it. Also, I've been on training with Conservatives, and Conservatives always talk about carrot and stick. And I think if we can use the languages of what you get out of it, then you start to make the change. But if we start telling people what they have to give up and lose, then guilt only goes so far. And I thought that's been really effective training. I don't always know how to use it, but I think it's an effective argument. So let's tell people what they can gain. But like asking a mum not to drop their kids at football or not to do the shopping with their car is a big ask. So tell them what they can do instead. So that's it.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Bridget. If you can make the comments or some of the suggestions of the links as a question with, say, hashtag bus campaign or something like that, so we can actually track it back, and then we can then feed that into sort of a suitable channel on the Slack group, so everyone is effectively in the same slipstream. So again, with anyone else who has any comments or any sort of things to add to this particular discussion, either hashtag climate campaign or something along those lines, just so we can identify the comments and then put people into the right silo in Slack, if that makes want of a better term. I was going to briefly get a response from Victoria because she's looking through the database. She's a professional journalist, just to get some kind of comment on the messaging about how we are actually getting this across, because obviously there's an issue with sensitivity at this particular time. Emma flagged it up before. We have to be very, very careful about the messaging. So it was just really to get a comment from Victoria about how we can approach that and how we can make sure that we are not treading on toes, not seen to be disrespectful, and also to be very sensitive about the current crisis and people who are being very deeply affected by that. Is Victoria on the call? Can I get away from Victoria if you're on the call? Oh, yes, sorry, Victoria Rance, sorry. Emma, could you just unmute Victoria? Or perhaps you can unmute yourself, Victoria? No? Oh,
yeah, okay. Can you hear me? In
yes,
fact,
just briefly, if you would mind. Thank you.
I'm not a professional journalist. I'm here under false pretenses in that case. I'm leading the Stop the Silvertown Tunnel campaign. That's my position.
Right.
So I was hoping to just sort of share with you a little bit about that.
If you could very briefly just give an outline of sort of that messaging, if you would mind.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So in fact, can I share my screen with you quickly and just show you two images? Is that
yep.
right? So that one and that one. So can you see that? This
yep.
is about Silvertown Tunnel campaign. So I'm not a journalist. I have obviously spoken to journalists a lot because of the campaign. That's the first part of the leaflet. I've got 10,000 of these leaflets printed just before lockdown, so that was bad timing. The tunnel is a new road tunnel, £1.2 billion PFI project, which will worsen air pollution and is, we hope, becoming more and more unnecessary. And now is a really good moment to start pressurising Sadiq Khan about it. So what I was just asking if people could take screenshots of that and the next one, and I can send it to anybody. So we're
Could you put the links in the chat if that's possible on the side?
Yeah, I'll send to that.
Thank you.
I haven't actually got a link, but can you see on that it says there's this at the bottom, it says follow Silvertown Tunnel. Silvertown TN is our Twitter account. There's a link there to the website, And this in London is the major road campaign.
Yep.
It's not part of the JR that's happening about the other road building projects because it's a PFI project.
Wow.
And it's just under the aegis of the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan. And so we're trying to stop it from happening. And although the contracts have been signed, there's a few planning permissions that are needed, and that's been held back because of the, the crisis and also construction. So that, as far as climate change goes, this is for Londoners a really crucial project to support. So that's why I wanted to share that. As far as messaging goes, my only experience is to constantly campaign and tie in air quality and deaths from air pollution, and have total sympathy for anyone who's suffering and who's had losses. And also to sort of point out that COVID-19 is made worse by air pollution, and air quality kills people every day. That's it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks.
Just to apologise to Victoria there, I meant to bring in Jessica and I brought in the wrong person. So sorry for slightly putting you on the spot there regarding the messaging. That's a communication on my end. Britta, do you want to finish off that section just with any comments, or are you happy to move forward to the next part? I am aware we're running behind schedule. So what I will do is essentially we have the next item, which is 14:30, additional training and development needs. Essentially, this is core. We have been discussing a lot of the issues regarding training needs and training provision that have come up in the conversation. If anyone has any specific training needs that they think have not been addressed already, or if they would like to reiterate their comments, hashtag skills, training, whatever it is, again, just to flag up so we can start putting people in the right areas on the Slack group, that would be useful. This could cover anything, including running successful campaigns, perhaps undertaking a skills audit of members that are in the Green Party Women. One of the problems that I have on GPEx, I'm the local support coordinator, and we have all the information on the CVCRM when people sign up to the party, and it's all there on the database, but currently there is no system for turning that information on the skills that people have into some active thing within the party, into recruitment regarding an activism or a particular campaign, which is bonkers, and it drives me nuts on a regular basis. So what we're trying to do with the Slack group is to shorten the difference between people saying we have the skills to do this and someone saying we need someone with skills to then activate on a particular campaign, ideally tying those together with as short a link as possible so that we're matching up skills with the need that we actually have running these specific activism campaigns. Adopting best practices within the group. We've said in the minutes on the agenda that we are adopting the Nolan principles for communication. That then will, of course, continue onto communications within the Slack groups, but also best practices within terms of running campaigns. Just to highlight that Britta is a job share with Caro New, who is also on GPEx, and that we have an awful lot of experience and an awful lot of very experienced women within the group who aren't necessarily functioning in terms of, sorry, not they are of course functioning, but in terms of how we are utilising their skills within the Green Party Women group, primarily because of the communication systems that has been flagged up by myself, by Emma, by Caroline, in terms of how we're actually getting that call to action to other members out. Ideally, we want to have sort of regular newsletters, regular mailings going out to people that have very specific calls of actions regarding the campaigns and the things that we are trying to sort of get off the ground, particularly in the COVID crisis at the minute. The other element in there is funding, and we've discussed about having a link to a donate button on our Green Party Women webpage, which we are currently in the process of doing, and hopefully that might also be able to support some of the training that has been offered both internally and externally as part of the group. So people can put in the chat group, people can put in the chat group any areas that they think would particularly be relevant, perhaps even short, mid or long term, because obviously this is something regarding the COVID crisis that can change on a very short scale of time, but we still need to have a long-term agenda and a plan for how we are actually developing the group. And obviously long-term investment we can't put aside for everything as a reactionary basis. So it's trying to get a balance between having a vision for the overall aims of the training for the women within the group, and also trying to react to a very on a very fast changing way. I think people are generally feeling that the Zoom group is a reasonable mechanism for doing that, in that I think people have not engaged necessarily with some of the communication tools like Zoom or WhatsApp because necessity hasn't sort of required it till this point. But certainly doing some kind of delivery or online training while we're in lockdown is possibly a way forward. So any suggestions that we have regarding that?